Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cloud Show with another episode and another great topic. This is a topic that is top of mind for a lot of people right now. It's about AI, and it's about large language models and small ones, by the way, because we're going to talk about how to relate to, am I going to use a large language model or do I only need a small one? I don't know, but I know who does. That's Christian Weyer, and he's on the Cloud Show tonight. Hello, Christian, my friend.
Hey, Magnus, what a nice picture of you in the intro.
I know, right? It's my show. But
you,
sir, you are the star. So let's start there. Let's start with you. Let's start by letting you tell the audience, who is Christian?
Well, so first, thank you again for inviting me and for having me. It has been a long time that we tried to set this up, for months, I guess. Schedules. So I'm Christian from ThinkTecture. I am from Germany, obviously, because I was very, very early before the show.
Yes,
you know that.
We're way on time. That's normal time for German people.
I have been in the business of software technology and software consulting since 1996. And I have always been a distributed applications and distributed systems guy.
Yep.
I have been working with Azure right away after the conference in 2008, where they were
announcing Azure,
showing it and announcing it.
Windows Azure,
and we could start playing with it. Yeah. So I've always had my head in the cloud, but always try to look at the end-to-end aspects of software solutions. So I'm looking into client stuff, I'm looking into server stuff, I'm looking into on-prem stuff, I'm looking into the cloud, I'm having a look at security and so on and so forth. And that brings me to some great insights on the technology side, because I call myself a technology catalyst, which means I'm always happy and I have the honor of looking into new stuff and newer stuff and even newer stuff than the new stuff, and try to find out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what could be useful for one or the other of our customers. Because our customers are always software developers on the other end. So we are working with enterprise developers and we are working with ISV developers.
Okay, brilliant. So let's just zoom in on our topic. As we were saying before the show here, we want to talk about large and small language models. I love that. So recently the world had this AI moment, AI for everything. Everything has to have AI and everything has to have a co-pilot. But if we're talking about
co-pilot,
if we're talking about language models now, your customers are trying to make sense of what to do with these language models. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So what our customers are always looking for is some kind of a technology or a set of technologies that sets them apart from the others, because they are developing software. And on the other side, and on the other side, enables their end customers, like you and me, using certain products or services, to have a better user experience and to enable new use cases. And of course, we had this moment, something around 2010, 11-ish, when we were moving away from pure desktop applications to mobile and web and desktop cross-platform solutions, right? Where we had the advent of single-page applications, doing web-based apps with React and with Angular and so on and so forth. So that was one of those moments where the ISVs and the enterprise developers had the aha moment. Of course, they also had that aha moment when they saw what the cloud could do.
Of course, yes.
Of course. Like the idea of serverless, isn't that just like, it's brilliant.
I'm still working I'm working with a lot of public sector right now, and they have known what it is, but they have not been allowed to use it at all.
Yeah.
But now, so they're coming into this now, I don't know, 10 plus years into the game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
So we had several of those moments, right?
Yeah.
But in the past, let's say, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, maybe even 14 years, there
Mhm.
hasn't been a major thing. Well, there was blockchain.
Block what?
Block.
I don't know.
Yeah, so there was one or the other technology that we thought could be a major shift, but then it was a major pain. So in the past 10 to 12 to 14 years, we just had to go on with the things we had. But then November 2022, we had that very prominent ChatGPT moment. And after that, especially OpenAI as a company was pleasing us with releasing access to not just that web application, which we could use to chat,
Mm.
but with the models behind that
Mm-hmm.
application. And those are the large language models because
Yep. Yep.
they are very, very large because they have been trained on a very, very large data set,
Yep.
or data sets.
Yep.
And of course, they are very, very large neural networks in order to provide
Yep.
us power that they actually can provide
Yep.
us.
So if I sit down with the browser and I open up ChatGPT there and I type things and I talk to it, it appears as if I'm talking to
Yeah,
it. Then I'm talking to a very, very, very large language model, like
exactly.
the
So
largest ones, right?
yes, so in the first instance, you are talking to a very sophisticated web application,
Yeah.
which does all the GUI and the chat history and the
Yeah.
state management.
Of
And
course.
then in the background, there is maybe one of the largest large language models in the world. Most
Exactly.
likely GPT 3.5 Turbo or GPT-4 or GPT-4 Turbo.
Yeah. All of them have very, very interesting names that you can't remember.
Yes, crazy names actually. And they get better when we will be talking about the small language models.
Yeah. So tell us what. So okay. So you won't be using a large language model for everything. You might need to use a smaller language model for some other scenarios. Why
You
is
could,
that?
you could. So
Mm.
the large language models have been made prominent by, let's call them, not so open source companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is open in the name of OpenAI, but maybe they are not so open because they did not open the data sets, they did not
Right.
open the code, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine because it's their business model. I don't judge them. But on the other side, there has been a very, very large open source community which has always been very, very active in the background and which was maybe somehow surprised by the ChatGPT moment. But then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they stopped hiding and they came out of their caves, and now we have a very, very diverse ecosystem and community with large language models being hosted by the big ones, large language models being hosted by an open source community, but also smaller models which are trained on public data. You can actually see the data sets which
Yep.
they have been
Right.
trained on. And B, B, A, B, they are much smaller in terms of the parameters of the neural network, which means they are not as powerful as the large language models, but they can be run in a much more economic way. And
Right.
they maybe can even be run on my system, maybe run on my laptop, maybe be run on the server of my customer. Or I actually, here in that corner, I have a Raspberry Pi 5
Mm-hmm.
running a small language model.
That's interesting because that opens up to a whole other set of applications.
Exactly. And I tell you, if you have been following the press a little bit, maybe in mid of June, there is the WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference from Apple.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think they will be finally launching a small language model for iOS. Because it makes sense, right?
It does. Yeah.
What is a language model? A language model is a program, a service, an
Mm-hmm.
application that understands natural language,
Yep.
either written or spoken.
Yep.
And that enables a bunch of new ideas of how we can work with software, of how we can enable new use cases into our existing or into our new software.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we don't want to be we don't want to be always have to talk to those servers and those cloud systems, those closed cloud systems, but maybe we want to have some kind of a freedom, a choice, where we can pick and choose the right model, either large or small.
And the data, knowing what data it has been trained on is another valuable thing, because if you have a large language model but you have no idea what data actually trained it, or it was trained on what data, you don't know what data that is. It can be data that is maybe heavily biased against something. It can be data that doesn't know anything about the thing that is your business. How do you know? You don't know. Yeah,
exactly. And for me and for the use cases, it's actually not about the world knowledge of those models, but about the quality of understanding language and giving me back data that I can work with in my applications. So there are several use cases where you can use a large language model. Of course, you can use it and do role playing. A lot of people are doing this, right? You can let it write a poem and let it write, all those things. But I see various use cases. One of the most prominent, I guess, is chat with your data. Talk to your data, right? So what others call co-pilots, I guess. Okay. A part of the co-pilot is also talk to your data.
But I mean, the GitHub Copilot, for example, right? It's trained on all the data that is available on GitHub.
Exactly.
Right? All the code has ever written and been checked into any of the repos and all the, everything in there. It understands that domain. That's what it knows. That's why it can suggest to you what's the next code statement I should be writing, because it knows that with a reasonable degree of certainty, right?
But with a large or smaller language model, which you don't have to train or even to fine-tune, you can use an approach called RAG. It's retrieval augmented generation, where you first do a data ingestion pipeline, and then you put it into a special database called a vector database. And then you do a semantic search on that part of the system, and then you get back results. And then you take the top 3, top 4, top 5 results, put it into the call to the large language model, and the large language model gives you a nice human-like answer. So that's one use case.
Exactly. It's pretty cool that we can do this now, though. That what you're saying is companies would like to talk to their data. So they have a lot of data, but they wouldn't want to give that data to the internet and let it be consumed into the large language model. Maybe that's business data, right?
Yeah. So we have customers who are fine with that, because, as you know, you can deploy GPT-4 Turbo in a data center around the corner with Azure, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's fine. And then you have an enterprise agreement with Azure, and maybe you already have all your emails inside of O365, so you are in the cloud anyway. So that's all fine. But then there, of course, are use cases where you maybe really have another level of privacy, like in legal cases or in tax situations, right? Where you really cannot give out all those data. And then we need to look at maybe not so large models, but a little bit smaller models that we can fit onto our hardware and into our existing infrastructure, and still will be able to fulfill our use cases.
So essentially using the same technology, except with a completely different data set, your customers' data specifically. And it's
yes and
smaller.
No. We actually also use different models. So there are a lot of offerings out there.
Yeah, you can download them.
There is OpenAI. You cannot download that model. It's just an API.
It's an API, but the model is too big. You couldn't download it if you tried.
Anyway, right. The same goes for Azure OpenAI, but then there are others from the open source world, like Mistral, like Llama from Meta, and like Phi, PHI
EHI,
Phi 2 and Phi 3 from Microsoft, you could run them or you could host them in the cloud. And you can do that also in any of the prominent cloud providers. But you can also just download them and let them run. But then those are still just the bare bones models.
Yep.
Now you need to have the solution again in place to let the model know your data.
Mm-hmm.
And there are basically two approaches.
Yep.
In order to let the model know your domain in terms of what is your domain language, what is your domain thinking,
yep.
what is the way that your domain is expressing things, then you are doing fine-tuning of the model.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's quite expensive still, but it's getting better.
Okay.
The other part, again, is doing RAG, the retrieval augmented generation, where you just have your data sitting in a database or in a blob storage or on a disk, and then you're putting it into a vector database, and then you can do a semantic search on that. And again, then you get back the data and talk to your model.
Yep.
And now the interesting part is there is an API standard, more or less, which is the OpenAI API.
OpenAI API. Almost the entire alphabet right there.
Oh, yeah. And each and everybody and his mother, more or less, is now trying to mimic the OpenAI API for their own models or model hosting solutions, so that you are able to switch between the large ones and the hosted ones, and the large ones and the small ones, and the hosted ones, and so on and so forth. So that you have quite a flexibility on the client and on the consuming side.
Yep. That's good. Exactly. So now you can pick and choose. And so when would you choose to have I think you were alluding to it, like when your data is maybe not so public, when there's a reason, like then you might not want to move that data to the cloud.
Yes.
You want to have it offline.
Yes. So one aspect is privacy.
Yeah.
Another aspect is ubiquitousness, which means I really want to have it everywhere. I think we will have language models everywhere. On our phones, on our tablets, on our laptops, on edge devices, in IoT scenarios, here on the desktop, in the company, and so on and so forth. So that's number 2. Number 3 is maybe specialization, because those large language models are know-it-alls, really like know-it-alls, like,
right.
And maybe you don't need those know-it-alls. You really want an expert in finance. You want an expert in taxes. You want an expert in X, Y, and Z, which is much more easier to achieve maybe when you are using a smaller model.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I think Scott Hanselman did it funny when he was asking. He was inside of Visual Studio Code, and he was talking to the Copilot, and he asked it for a recipe for an omelet or something. I was like, maybe you need that, but maybe not in the context of I'm in Visual Studio Code. So maybe that language model knows a little bit of things that it's not relevant.
So as far as I know, Copilot uses the Codex model, which should not be able to answer that. But I did not know what
somehow he got some. I don't know exactly what he did.
Okay.
But at least the point is still valid, right? When you're in a certain context, you don't need all the world of other contexts. You want to have a specialist in the context that is relevant for what you're doing.
Yeah. And then the last point I see is what we call performance, and performance not in the classical sense. So of course in the classical sense, as in latency, because sometimes talking to GPT whatever number can be quite slow. Although they are called turbo, they are not turbo. So latency is very important.
We need to call it turbo. Maybe it isn't so turbo.
What's in a name? What's in a name? So it's about latency, but it's also about the quality. It's about maybe that the data is from a certain level of quality, that it has a certain bias that you can maybe even tweak and control. So performance is a very, very important factor. Then, of course, you have a myriad of language models out there. So there is a community called Hugging Face. Have you ever heard of them?
I've heard about Hugging Face, but I'm not sure what I know
They
what
have
it
a
is.
very nice logo. They have that Hugging
The
Face
Hugging
look.
Face, yeah.
Yes, from the emojis, exactly. And this is more or less like GitHub for AI. They have everything, not just large language models and language models. They have literally everything in AI.
Mhm.
And from there, you can really, you can dive into the portal and you can come out weeks later, right? Because it's so huge. And they have what they call, evaluation reports and leaderboards where you can have a look at which kind of use case and which kind of scenario, which large or small language model is how good or not so good.
Okay.
And the models that I personally and we with our customer work with are either in the cloud, like OpenAI and Azure
If
OpenAI.
that's a relevant situation,
Yes.
yeah.
Then there is Mistral AI, which is a French company, which is very, very interesting for our
Mistral.
Mistral AI.
AI?
They have a platform they called Le Plateforme.
Ah, bah oui, la
Ah ouais,
plateforme.
bien sûr.
Bien sûr.
So, and then Mistral also has open source models like Mistral 7B, and the B is for billion parameters. And then there's also the Mixtral, and then there are derivatives like Zephyr. You can hear that, like Mistral is a wind, Zephyr is a wind. So they are all to into those weird names also in the open source world.
Yep.
And of course, now we are also looking into Llama 3, which has been released just a few weeks ago by Meta, and into Phi 3, which has been released to the open world by Microsoft.
So you kind of need to have have experts around to advise you on which model is the one that we're going to use.
You know what? I have the comfort that I can do this 100%.
Yeah.
24/7, more or less.
If you can, yeah, exactly. However much you have energy for.
Yeah.
Which is
And
good. Yeah.
You know I have a lot of energy.
I do know that. All right. Well, I think this has been very enlightening, and I think we could talk for hours, possibly days, about this.
Sure.
But I'm going to have to ask you to come back and talk more about this topic at a later date, because we are out of time for this episode. But anyway, it's been a bloody brilliant conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Christian, for being on the Cloud Show today. And thank you
for having me again.
Oh, absolutely, our pleasure. And audience, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know in comments, etc. And see you on the next episode of the Cloud Show.
Thank you.